Story 1. For those unaware, a significant portion of that 30% are people who receive about $150 to $350 a month. I would prefer being able to easily hear and understand conversations instead of receiving $150 per month. The Navy damaged my hearing when I was still in my 20s. Story 2. Most of them collect pretty small payments. My brother was on a machine gun team in the Corps. He was carrying 70 pounds of tripod and ammunition and jumped off a bridge to take cover during a war game exercise. He fractured both his legs and has never fully recovered. This was 28 years ago. His disability checks are small. I don't know how much, but it is not even enough for a used car payment. He would rather have legs that do not hurt. This is hardly an issue. In the grand scheme of the federal budget, looking to save money by further harming our veterans should be much lower on the list. Story 3. If we can afford the war, then we can afford to help those we sent there. Period. When sending people off to a foreign war, consider this in the cost or do not send them. Simple stuff here. Story 4. If someone is disabled and cannot prosper, the responsibility of a good society is to create opportunities for their survival. Weak societies penalize vulnerable individuals. Story 5. The military is extremely challenging. If it is not carrying 90 pounds of gear, it is neglecting mental health. Take care of our veterans. They deserve to be taken care of. Story 6. The United States of America has been involved in 2 major wars over the last 20 years and has maintained global operations around the clock for decades. If we, as Americans, are willing to engage in that level of warfare and agree that it is necessary for the country's interests and security, then the least we can do is support our veterans who take risks with their lives, bodies, and minds to answer the call. We should be providing our veterans with more support, not worrying about what they currently receive. Our Department of Veterans Affairs benefits are not sufficient. As the richest nation on earth, we can afford to give them our best because they are making sacrifices for their own lives and health on our behalf, sacrifices that civilians cannot or will not make. Story 7. Your framing suggests that regular citizens should resent others for receiving government benefits. The opposite is true. Everyone should be critical of the government because we all deserve far more benefits than our country provides. Story 8. The disabled veterans I know are all disabled, and it all resulted from either their active duty or the bases they were assigned to. The way the Department of Veterans Affairs works, they do not just hand out disability determinations without clear evidence. Story 9. People forget how long the price tag for war lasts. United States taxpayers were paying Civil War soldiers' widows' pensions into the 21st century. Story 10. Many people in this world generate passive income from generational wealth. They do not participate in the workforce and often do not contribute to society in any meaningful way. This is a free benefit provided at the expense of everyone else, past and present, who struggle to support their families. Give veterans a break. In fact, give the rest of us a break. We are set to lose 1/3 of jobs across North America by 2030, and our mindsets are so troubled that we are debating whether those injured in war should receive compensation. Are we serious? Are we collectively unreasonable? This is how we should all feel. The lower and middle classes are at great risk, and we are still sitting idle, complaining about everything except the potential collapse of society and what that means for everyone who is not wealthy. Story 11. It seems like the subtext of your question is whether people feel that it is fair and justified. If that is the question, I feel that the military is vastly underpaid for the risks they undertake, especially exposure to unknown chemical hazards such as burn pits. I begrudge them nothing. Story 12. Another way to look at this question is, how do you feel about more than 30% of United States veterans entering service healthy and leaving service with a disability for the rest of their lives, yet receiving minimal compensation? Perhaps we should ask why they are not protected from avoidable injuries while serving their country. Story 13. I do not understand the question. What do my feelings have to do with the commitment we as a country make? Regardless of how you feel about our use of the military, we ask young men to put their bodies and minds in harm's way to defend our government. We tell them that should they come to harm while doing so, we will take care of them and their families. Many do. Many of those who do are harmed. So we help take care of them. Where do my feelings come into it? Story 14. I feel like the government owes them what they promised at enlistment, at an absolute minimum in terms of disability, pension, and quality healthcare. I also think that any service over 8 years or any amount of combat deployment should lead directly to citizenship if the person was not a citizen when they enlisted. Story 15. The military is a machine that takes in healthy young individuals and uses them until they become broken and old. Do not want to pay for veteran healthcare and assistance? Then do not fight wars that put military members in positions where they can be harmed. It is that simple. Story 16. 30% is probably extremely low as the number of people who should be receiving payments. The military and deployments especially are very hard on the body. Story 17. A lot of misconceptions stem from jealousy about a payment. Many see a veteran powerlifting and looking amazing physically and find out he is 70% disabled. Oh, the outrage. Until you talk to the person and realize he cannot maintain eye contact or hold a conversation. Shockingly, no one has hired him in years. How do I feel? Not as bad as the veteran I just described and thousands like him or her feel. Story 18. I'm surprised it is not much higher. I have nothing against individuals receiving disability benefits. My dad's knees were damaged climbing up and down the steep stairs on ships carrying crates of food for 20 years. I want all Americans to have equal access to the healthcare they deserve and are already paying for. I know it would not take much effort to make top-quality healthcare affordable to United States taxpayers while still allowing room for privatization. Story 19. As a veteran receiving a small payment for my 39 years of service and regaining the ability to hear with the devices provided due to my exposures, I appreciate it. Yes, I volunteered to join in 1975, and back then our earplugs were pieces of wax that we put in our ears. Others used cigarette butts. When firing a tank round or machine gun, that was not enough protection compared to what we have today. The wear and destruction of the cartilage in my knees, from marching, carrying a loaded pack, to jumping down from every truck, tank, or piece of equipment, will eventually require replacements. If you have not served and been exposed to these conditions, you should consider yourself lucky. If you were injured while working at any business and were unable to work for the rest of your life, would you not expect that business to compensate you and help you? Look at the number of people on Social Security disability. You will see it is much higher than the number of military members. June 2025 Social Security Disability Benefits Statistics Report. Total number of Social Security disability beneficiaries: 8,179,000. Disabled workers: 7,121,000. Spouses of disabled workers: 87,000. Children of disabled workers: 972,000. Average monthly Social Security disability benefit amount: $1,442.67. Disabled workers: $1,582.07. Spouses of disabled workers: $443.83. Children of disabled workers: $510.49. Story 20. I think it's nonsense, but not for the reason you'd expect. I think it's nonsense because the Department of Defense knows the damage they are doing to our best and brightest, and they do not care. They could be issuing proper equipment, insulating cockpits, and providing effective ear protection. Yet they are not. My dad, 81, was a fighter pilot in Vietnam. He never dealt with Agent Orange personally and never dropped it from his plane. He has a damaged pancreas and, as a result, diabetes and liver disease. He has had tinnitus since 1969. He always believed the Department of Veterans Affairs was for the enlisted personnel. It wasn't until the Honoring Our Promise to Address Comprehensive Toxics Act and the onset of his dementia that I was able to convince him he was eligible for and deserved benefits. Throughout the process and to this day, he denies that the Air Force could have ever done anything to harm him. He does not believe that being on the same base or runway as Agent Orange could have exposed him. He does not believe cosmic radiation could have contributed to his Alzheimer's. He complained throughout the process that he did not want to do it. Only my constant reminders about the financial support my mom would receive after his passing convinced him to go through with it. That is the kind of loyalty these men and women have to their country and to the services that cause this damage to them. They deserve compensation for this and much more. Story 21. They deserve it. Do you complain when billionaires and politicians steal everything from the federal treasury? Unless you are out in the streets protesting those thefts every day, there is no argument against the legitimate needs of our veterans. Story 22. United States Marine Corps veteran with a torn anterior cruciate ligament and medial collateral ligament during training. Inexperienced Navy doctors just out of medical school performed the surgery, and I received almost no physical therapy. 25 years later, my knee is still bruised behind the knee and requires ice and ibuprofen for swelling and pain. For that, I receive a 10% disability rating, which amounts to less than $200 per month. I would trade that money to have my knee back in a heartbeat. I believe that a significant portion of the 30% disability ratings are veterans like myself receiving almost nothing for a lifetime of aches and pains. Additionally, the 25 years of nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drugs have affected my liver. If you are complaining about what we receive, try serving and see how you feel. Story 23. To receive disability payments, individuals must have documented injuries that are verified. From that point, the level of disability is determined, ranging from 10% to 100%. The payments reflect this. At 10%, they may receive less than $200 a month. At the highest rate, under certain circumstances, it may be around $4,500. The portion of veterans determined to qualify does not reveal much other than that military service can damage the body and often does. Much of this damage is not discovered or disclosed until years or even decades later. Since even a low rate can affect living conditions cause pain, limit the ability to earn a living, and affect relationships, these payments are well-deserved. Story 24. I am a disabled Gulf War veteran. Our average age is 58 years old. Only 50% of Gulf War veterans from 1990 to 1991 are still alive. There are 2.5 times as many Vietnam War veterans surviving. Around 2003, I went to donate blood with my coworkers. I was taken aside and informed that I was not allowed to donate blood, and this also included any children conceived after 1990. Imagine how you feel hearing that your service to the country could affect your children. Thankfully, not one veteran ever developed Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, so the ban on blood donations was lifted. I would give you every penny I have ever received from the Department of Veterans Affairs if I could have my health back. Story 25. What the majority of the country does not understand is that while in the military, you will see, hear, feel, smell, and do things that most people do not even know exist. These experiences come with risks to the body and often cause damage. This job is not directly requested, but it is required nonetheless. People are asked to put themselves at risk, both mentally and physically. This risk sometimes results in service members becoming disabled and needing compensation. As a veteran with no disability, I am perfectly fine with it. Story 26. You are welcome to sign up for a chance to be one of those disabled veterans. The government is always looking for more. My guess is you will just stick to the keyboard and post inflammatory questions targeting disabled veterans. Story 27. Am I supposed to have strong negative feelings because my government pays a monthly small amount to the people it has disabled? Or to disabled people in general? I feel better about that than I do about this leading question with its resentful tone. Story 28. I am 100% fine with it. I am the daughter of 2 veterans, one of whom is disabled, so I would be a huge hypocrite if I did not support veterans' rights. I am liberal and wish our government would spend more money taking care of the needs of our veterans and less money on things like bombs, tanks, and immigration and customs enforcement. Story 29. My son served 6 years in flight operations for the Navy. At 25, his tinnitus will only worsen as he ages. His grandfather, an Army veteran, pointed out that the Department of Veterans Affairs qualifies these individuals so easily for partial or full disability because they know there is no way to fully prevent these long-term conditions. It is seen as just another cost of the military system. Story 30. People who attack veterans for receiving disability benefits are truly the worst individuals on the planet. Story 31. Most of them earned it, And the very few who might be taking advantage of something do not necessitate the program disappearing, such as welfare. In my opinion, we are not spending nearly enough on the Veterans Affairs medical benefits they are supposed to be receiving as well. Story 32. They sacrificed their legs, backs, ears, and mental health, most before they turned 35. I say they earned it. Story 33. Fine. I think that's totally okay. We all know how brutal service can be. I am not surprised that 30% of veterans are disabled given the nature of their work. I think we should give more support to veterans. I am not okay with the way the current administration is wasting our tax dollars and giving billions to corporate welfare. Story 34. We spend more in our military budget than the next 4 nations combined. You think I am worried about taking care of the people who made it back? Here is your home in the remote wilderness with 10 acres, free and clear, no taxes on it. Have a nice life. Thank you for your service. Your check is in the mail. At least my tax dollars go to something that helps actual Americans and are not sent off to be spent on missiles and inappropriate activities by some corrupt politician in a foreign country. Story 35. I have a friend who is 27 years old. He served in the Navy and completed a full term so he could have his college expenses paid by the military. He did not have a combat role. He worked in the radar room. Now, he has chronic back pain since leaving the service, severe enough to qualify for disability benefits. I am amazed that the percentage of disabled veterans is not over 90%. Story 36. Sounds like we need to stop sending poor children to fight wealthy men's wars and take care of the veterans while we find the determination. Story 37. Hey, let us fight a war for 20 years and then get upset when a bunch of veterans end up disabled. Start at the source. Fight fewer wars and your Veterans Affairs budget will go down. With that said, there is fraud, and fraud should definitely be investigated and prosecuted like the Veterans Affairs Department does. Story 38. I have no problem supporting our veterans who have given so much for our nation. One does not need to have seen combat in order to serve. Our veterans gave so much, and our nation should give back. All these profits from these tariffs should be used to help our veterans and provide more for what they lost. Story 39. Veterans do not collect monthly payments for the rest of their lives simply because they are disabled enough. They volunteered by signing a contract, and part of that contract stipulations are, paraphrasing, that they could die, and also if they get hurt and survive, they can apply to receive compensation for their injuries. This is why the semantics matter. Time and time again, I have conversations both online and offline with civilians and fellow veterans, and it is very clear to me that the majority of people do not understand the difference between Social Security disability insurance and Veterans Affairs disability benefits. This disability compensation benefit, which I like to call veterans compensation, is much more closely related to workers' compensation. This is a more appropriate analogy because it represents payments made as compensation for being injured on the job. It also removes the inherent stigma of receiving disability benefits while continuing to work. Some people are of the mindset, who cares what other people think? And I understand that perspective. However, it ignores situations where others' thoughts about veterans can negatively impact their lives. For example, if a veteran communicates that they receive a percentage of Veterans Affairs compensation instead of Veterans Affairs disability, they might avoid some misunderstandings. There are also concerns from veterans about how another country's immigration officials might perceive their disability rating. I hope this helps to clear up some of the confusion. Story 40. Generally, it's partial disability, and they are paid for that loss of ability. For example, if you permanently injure your back at work, workers' compensation will provide money for the permanent loss of function in that part of your body. You may still be able to work, but your back will never be the same. It isn't disability like Social Security disability insurance or supplemental security income, where you are found to be permanently and totally disabled and unable to work any kind of job. It's more like workers' compensation. Story 41. So you are saying that as a nation you should have considered whether you wanted to send so many young people to fight your chosen wars of aggression? Yes, it is too late. Pay them and think harder next time the United States of America is threatening to invade another country. Story 42. I am almost certain that the vast majority of that 30% is partial disability, and those people are receiving maybe a couple of $100s a month. Story 43. Honestly, I do not really understand the question, or more accurately, what the question is trying to get at. I feel like paying for veterans' disabilities that were incurred in the course of service to the United States military is the bare minimum that we could do for them. I also feel like the definition of disabled could and should probably be expanded to increase the number of veterans who are able to receive payments for medical expenses beyond 30%. Story 44. Original poster. I think the question is, what do you think of veterans receiving disability compensation? On its face, this question is phrased as though veterans are somehow taking advantage of Department of Veterans Affairs disability. I would love to breathe well, run again, sleep uninterrupted, not have anxiety issues, and have intact and healthy skin, but I don't get to be free of any of those issues. Having the Department of Veterans Affairs as a support to provide care and disability support is incredibly helpful, as I would struggle to perform most jobs. My stance is that I am incredibly happy our country provides support and assistance to veterans, and I hope our government continues to do so. Story 45. A friend of mine receives almost $4,000 monthly from being a disabled veteran. He has always said he would gladly give it up if it meant he could hear again. Story 46. I feel a lot better about 5 million veterans getting healthcare checks than the 25 million non-elderly and non-disabled people who are receiving them and have not served. Story 47. I wish they would tax billionaires just a few percent more, give veterans more money, use the funds to build programs for impoverished areas to lift people out of poverty and reduce crime, build affordable government housing for those in need, and subsidize after-school youth programs so children do not end up on the streets. It seems I am in the minority for wanting to help people whose lives are extremely difficult. For some reason, the majority of Americans oppose helping those in need but are fine with the rich getting richer, even though they have more money than they or their families will ever spend. Story 48. My father was one of that 30%. He would have rather been able to walk without a cane due to a screwed-up spine, breathe regularly despite asthma, eat what he wanted despite service-related diabetes, and not be in constant pain. The Army did all of that and more. We owe our veterans more than we give. Story 49. I just saw a news report about all of the Air Force veterans who served at Area 51 and have many medical issues due to exposure to radiation and other unknown factors. Their service is so classified that they cannot even qualify for government medical benefits, and that is a real shame. The government cares about you until they do not. Story 50. I am an Iraq War veteran. Outside of administrative jobs, the kind of abuse a soldier's body endures daily is intense. Just getting in and out of trucks to carry out tasks is tough because we always wear a Kevlar helmet. You cannot ride in any Army vehicle without one. Most of the time, we also carry a lot of gear, such as body armor and weapons, which are heavy. One thing you will never hear a veteran say is, "Damn, my knees feel great today." Story 51. A guy I know served on nuclear submarines for a while. Apparently, walking on steel all the time is terrible for your knees, so submariners tend to have bad knees. The point is, even the non-combat jobs can still take their toll. I am much more worried about the billionaire leeches than some guy whose Veterans Affairs pension is why he can make his car payment. Story 52. No one in my family is a disabled veteran, so it is not a personal matter. I support benefits for disabled veterans. I would rather my tax money go to them than to a country halfway around the world that I do not care much about. Story 53. If you were injured during your service, you absolutely deserve support. A few people I know from the Navy said they exaggerated their injuries to benefit from the system. They tried to take advantage. Some of them had an easy and safe tour of duty with little danger but still tried to exploit the system in payments. However, I doubt most people lie about their symptoms and issues. Story 54. My husband has terrible hearing from 12 years in the Navy. He receives $1,100 per month and free medical care through the Department of Veterans Affairs. We are not complaining. Story 55. I would love to give up my disability and get a job. Unfortunately, I cannot leave my house without crippling panic attacks. I cannot relax because I am convinced people are out to get me at all times. This constant fight or flight response has destroyed my health, and my doctor said I have a 50% chance of dying within the next 10 years. I cannot answer my phone or my door. I cannot mow my lawn or go grocery shopping. Like many others, All I hear all day, every day is a high-pitched ringing sound. However, I did not include tinnitus in my disability claim because it is low on the list of my health issues. The way I see it, the wealthy individuals who send children to die do not care about poor families losing their sons. But they do care about money, so the more money we can tax them to pay for the Department of Veterans Affairs, the better. Story 56. If you want to mitigate ever-increasing Veterans Affairs budgets, start voting for politicians who pursue diplomacy over military action, who increase American influence through prosperity rather than military action, and who seek to fund foreign aid rather than bombs. Less conflict and war means fewer troubled veterans. Also, change the medical policies within the Department of Defense so service members can get needed care while they are in service to avoid permanent issues down the road. Are some veterans gaming the system? Undoubtedly. Is the cost to measure and enforce worth the savings? I do not think so. I would gladly give up my compensation to have my health and sanity back to what they were prior to the Marines. Story 57. Okay, so, I was stupid, yeah? Sold the best years of my life away to the government, heedless of the ethical dilemma of the wars and all of history. I was desperate. I didn't know what I wanted from life. I just knew my fiancée deserved better than what she'd got up to that point. And I didn't know anything about head trauma either. So when I had a training accident that fractured my skull, I just trusted medical professionals to take care of me. How was I to know they were neglecting me? I had a serious brain injury. I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know what depression looked like, what a traumatic brain injury means or even is. All I know is that after that, I kept disappointing myself and everyone I served with. I couldn't keep up in any respect. I couldn't study. My emotional regulation was terrible, and my temper was worse. I didn't understand that any of that might be medical. I just thought I was stupid and couldn't get my act together. Everyone else seemed to feel the same way, and nobody was talking about traumatic brain injuries. And I didn't know anything about real grief. So when my mom flew out to visit me the weekend before a surprise deployment and died that Saturday of an aneurysm, I could have handled it better. But instead, I handled it as badly as I could, spent the next 2 months working and sleeping like a zombie, and the next few years holding a grudge against the world and everyone in it. And I didn't understand people anymore. Maybe I never had before that. But when I exhausted command's collective patience with me and backed myself into a corner, I felt trapped and bullied, and I wanted to kill myself, and I said as much. Then I spent a month on involuntary psychiatric hold. Then they administratively separated me from service, with a note on my discharge papers listing the reason as condition other than disability. So I spent the next 5 years struggling in every conceivable way a banged-up 30-something in manual labor can, until the Department of Veterans Affairs finally decided that yes, the military failed me, no, it wasn't my fault, and yes, I deserved just shy of $5,000 a month to support me and my family. Mortgage assistance, school money with additional housing stipend, and most importantly, a lifetime of medical care and much-needed therapy. So let's review. Lifetime passive income and assistance, permanent brain damage, 3 kids to put through school, and I still need to figure out what to do with myself beyond chores and sitting on the couch exploring alcoholism. I'm in school now to be a social worker. Hopefully, I can prevent someone else from going through all that. Yeah, it probably seems unfair that I get all that money and help and civilians get nothing. I agree. This is the story of how the United States military turned a Southern Baptist Republican into an atheist democratic socialist. Which you don't need brain damage to be, but it helps. Story 58. We have made the decision to be a warmongering nation by choosing leaders who do that. We must pay for the consequences and take care of our veterans. Story 59. My best friend is 28 years old and spent 1 year in administrative work at one of the busiest bases in the Eastern Hemisphere. It gave him post-traumatic stress disorder so severe that he experienced panic attacks, nearly causing him to cancel his wedding the week before. Joining the military can seriously affect your mental health, even without active duty experience. You might not understand it unless you have lived it. 30% feels low to me. Story 60. I believe it is probably about 30% lower than what it should be, judging from the difficulties my family has experienced. Story 61. The way they do not is strange. Some individuals deserve far more support than they receive. especially those who lose a limb, have extensive facial scarring, or are blinded. I know a veteran who retired at 62, still works full-time in the same field, and receives a 70% rating, which equals $1,900 per month tax-free in addition to the pension. Some of the disabilities being compensated include acid reflux, gout, and tinnitus. It seems some of these conditions were likely to occur regardless. Story 62. I would rather provide support than offer free medical care to senators and members of Congress. But that is just my opinion. Story 63. I have gone back and forth on this. Every veteran knows someone who manipulated the system. Unfortunately, many more have been completely mistreated by the military and the Department of Veterans Affairs. The military, especially in certain branches and jobs, is actively hostile to medical care and record keeping. Personally, I broke multiple bones and had multiple concussions when I was in the Marine Corps. Not a single injury was recorded despite one concussion and the bones requiring hospital treatment. Most of the other concussions ended with a sergeant telling me to take a 5-minute break and drink water. There is a great Navy SEAL team episode arc about this. A SEAL had chronic traumatic encephalopathy from serving in Iraq. Unfortunately, his service record did not document head injuries, so the Department of Veterans Affairs refused treatment. He ended up taking his own life. While fiction, it accurately highlighted the very real inadequate treatment of injuries, especially head injuries. Another compound issue is that many military health issues are chronic, not acute, so linking them to service is difficult. Even if a specific injury is absent, military service can be hard on the body. Constant exposure to chemicals and constant strain on joints add up, and medical consequences may not appear for years or decades. Ultimately, given the hostility to medical care, lack of record keeping, and the chronic nature of service-related disabilities, I support full medical care for life and disability payments for any medical issue. Story 64. How about you go put your life on the line, get injured, and come back to answer the question? Of course, we absolutely need to take care of our veterans, injured or not. You may not agree with the war or conflict we get involved with, but our issue is with Congress, not our veterans. Story 65. I hope the 71,000 jobs being cut and the defunding of the Department of Veterans Affairs only affect the veterans who voted for Donald Trump. He called for the Constitution to be suspended so he could have more power. He is violating multiple amendments right now. At that point, veterans who support Donald Trump turned their backs on their oath to support a massively unfit wannabe dictator who turned out to be a pedophile. I could not care less about them. When a domestic threat to the Constitution appeared, they chose the threat over protecting the Constitution, disregarding those who paid the ultimate price to protect it. Story 66. I feel fine with it. I hate that they are disabled because I know exactly how it feels, but nobody chooses this. I know most people wish more than anything that they could live normally again. I judge anyone who has a problem with it. Story 67. I am a recipient of a 20% disability due to service in Vietnam. I also receive health benefits. I served 4 years in the Navy, including 1 year in Vietnam. I was exposed to Agent Orange and worked in very loud conditions without ear protection. Active military personnel were not treated well during my service, so I appreciate the benefits now. Story 68. I say this as a combat veteran myself with a son who is currently on active duty. First, not everyone receives 100%. Disability rating determines the monthly pay. It is not like 5.2 million veterans are drawing full active pay. Many are at 10 to 20% for some hearing loss. The military is hard on the mind and body, and we should be taking care of those who are willing to serve. They all volunteered. Second, there is an entire ecosystem around gaming the system to get the best rating possible. There are representatives at the Veterans of Foreign Wars helping older veterans who have a bit of hearing loss at 70 to get benefits, rightly or wrongly. An older Vietnam veteran getting a 10% rating and free hearing aids is not going to break the bank. We need to take care of those who served. They should not have to game the system just to get the care they need. However, I acknowledge that there is also some abuse occurring. Story 69. When you are wealthy, you do not receive welfare. You receive bailouts, subsidies, non-recourse loans, and military contracts for wars that lobbyists know are losing propositions. Story 70. Even with service-connected injuries and a lifelong disability, my benefits are not excessive, but my medications are covered, as well as anything related to my brain, which was injured by a flying 18-pound PKP fire extinguisher. My right hemisphere is affected. Unfortunately, the medications have been causing other known and documented problems that are not covered. Veterans Affairs care has improved significantly since I first enrolled in the 1980s, but dental care is only provided to veterans who are 100% disabled. The medications I must take to prevent hourly seizures deplete all vitamin D and calcium and also affect my gums, leaving my teeth in poor condition with no hope of repair. Overall, I am glad that I no longer have seizures, but I am medicated beyond belief and can barely function. Yes, I do work. I cannot drive or operate machinery. Story 71. I feel we should do our best to lower that number by not injuring people in the first place. However, it probably needs to be higher because we are not effective at keeping soldiers healthy and safe. We as a country have an obligation to help those who serve us. Story 72. If a citizen fights for your country, domestically or abroad, whether they return injured, disabled, or completely healthy, they should not have to worry about healthcare, housing, or food for the rest of their life. Governments are exploitative towards veterans, and since most countries have not had a military draft in decades, most current veterans are voluntary members of the armed forces. This should apply globally. Story 73, you probably don't mean it to be, but honestly, this question is kind of gross. I think it is a national disgrace that any veteran is homeless, without income or health care. I am not a veteran, and I am a strong liberal, but I have the utmost respect for anyone who served in the military, regardless of their political affiliation or personal beliefs. These people put their lives on the line and gave up personal freedom to do so. We should honor them by ensuring that they are cared for. Story 74. I am a 100% permanent and totally disabled combat veteran in my mid-40s. I have been out of the service for 12 years now. I do not get paid enough and barely scrape by. Thank God my wife, who is a 90% disabled combat veteran, has a career. I would give almost anything to have my mental and physical health back, or at least be on par with other men in their 40s. My life will be cut short due to my injuries, which is difficult because I have children and family who need me. I do not regret my service, but I wish all the sacrifices we made, all the bloodshed, and loss meant something besides making politicians richer. I am not a fortunate son. Story 75. I think it is sad and probably underreported. There are many veterans still fighting for benefits. Story 76. I feel the same way about it as I do any and all social programs. Fantastic for those who deserve it and shame on the people who exploit the system. Story 77. If the money truly goes to them, why not? At least my tax dollars will be going to something worthwhile. Story 78. The military put me in a position to get post-traumatic stress disorder. The military subjected me to enough head trauma that I have brain damage from traumatic brain injuries. The military worked my body enough that the nerves in my spine and neck don't function properly. I would trade my monthly disability check to be able to handle daily situations without wanting to harm myself or others over minor inconveniences. I would love to be able to recall experiences and learn new skills without getting a migraine. I have friends who blew discs in poor parachute landings who are struggling to get rated for disability. Veterans did not ask for the ailments that accompany service. Many people receiving disability checks deserve them, and for some, the compensation is not enough. How do you put a price on bodily function being taken away? Anyone presenting this fact as something the government just hands out is not in a position to question it. Story 79. Some loaded language there. Considered rather than just being disabled. Collect rather than something like being compensated with. You can eliminate the part about for the rest of their lives because permanent disability implies this already. And why ask about our feelings? Is it because, for some people, there is emotion whenever fairness is at issue? Should there be? Original poster. Can you tell us how you feel? Story 80. I witnessed a war crime. Living with that has been difficult. They harmed me for life. They should compensate me for what I have to endure. Story 81. I don't mind it. I feel more strongly about how we bail out wealthy people and subsidize their losses. There are too many homeless veterans anyway. A few $100 monthly check doesn't bother me. I would rather more people have some kind of safety net. Story 82. I have a friend who was a driver in Iraq. She was injured by an improvised explosive device. Looking at her, you wouldn't know, but she suffers from migraines, memory issues, and her shoulder pops painfully every time she uses it. Attributed to the anthrax vaccine, she gets ovarian cysts that leave her bedridden a few times a year. The post-traumatic stress disorder alone is terrible. She is 80% disabled and deserves her payments. Her body paid for our war, and our country can afford to give her a $4,000 per month check. Story 83. I collect a small payment of $175 a month for hearing loss and tinnitus. That is it, and that is all I will ever claim unless there is an Agent Orange type situation in the future. For now and the foreseeable future, that is what I receive, $175 a month and assistance. Related to hearing loss. Honestly, if you took it away, I would survive, but I would still like benefits related to hearing aids because they are very expensive. Even with hearing protection, there was not much I could have done to protect my ears. If you are curious, I was in the Navy and operated 5-inch cannons as part of my job. Story 84. My dad was out on training and tore every ligament in his lower back, causing additional damage. He had to be carried back because he couldn't walk. He was bedridden for months while recovering. He tried working after his military service, but it didn't take long for his back injury to make him completely unable to work. He is fully service-connected disabled and earned every penny. Story 85. Who did they vote for in 2024? I am serious. If you have been to war and still vote for Make America Great Again, no sympathy. Story 86. That's the cost of the United States military not being interested in buying and using any of the commonly available tools to avoid workplace injury. Most of those veterans were not injured in a war. They were injured in unnecessarily loud engine rooms, standing over obviously toxic burnouts, or carrying around a rucksack with badly fitting boots and not enough training. The military decided they would rather have permanently injured service members than listen to the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. This is simply the bill for that decision. Consequences. Story 87. Original poster seems to be expecting a negative response based on the tone of their message, without understanding the facts beyond a budget sheet. However, most answers appear to support veteran disability, which is good. I am 100% disabled, although I dislike that terminology. I don't know what I would do without the Department of Veterans Affairs. When I left the military, even after 2 tours as a scout sniper, I did not consider myself disabled. However, doctors identified issues I was masking internally that surfaced a few years ago. All I can say is that I am grateful for the Department of Veterans Affairs. Some people may make injury claims for conditions that are not permanent but are recognized as disabilities by doctors at the time. Even so, the damage is already done. Many do not understand the amount of physical and mental stress the military places on the body and brain. For example, a 12-mile hike carrying 60 pounds, along with sleep deprivation and lack of food, is extremely demanding. When you enter the military environment, you leave normal civilization and enter a realm where normal instincts disappear. You become highly attuned to patterns and adversity without fully understanding how this will affect you later. Some people handle it well, some do not, and some say they do but really do not. I was the latter, and I fully support more veterans receiving benefits. There are options to prevent future claims, such as incorporating suppressors on rifles to protect hearing, and developing better gear to absorb harder impacts, including improved boots. Load-bearing or exoskeleton-type equipment could help carry heavier loads. Lighter armor that functions beyond protection, such as intelligent armor that powers communications equipment and phones, is another possibility. Story 88. Great. Everyone who needs assistance should receive it. Every American should have free healthcare and education as well. The richest country on the planet cannot do the bare minimum for its citizens, even with millions of immigrants essentially doing slave labor. It is all just gross and shameful. Story 89. My wife's back is completely damaged from an accident during United States Air Force basic training, and she has never received any compensation from the United States government. The United States Air Force doctors basically told her it was fine despite her being in constant pain. Story 90. They should receive more recognition. These men and women sacrificed everything so the rest of us could freely express ourselves online and discuss popular culture. That is true freedom, and I am grateful for it. Anyone who disrespects our veterans is unpatriotic and should be dismissed. It is shameful how poorly we take care of the people who keep us safe. Story 91. How do I feel? Support these people. American interests are important enough to bomb half the world and take care of the people who do your dirty work. Full disclosure, I am a veteran. Story 92. We pay many people who are not disabled a large amount of money to do very little and ask for more campaign funding. They are called Congress members, and they earn $174,000 a year with the best healthcare available, while telling us that we do not need healthcare. People who have truly sacrificed for this nation should definitely receive disability benefits. Story 93. These people serve their country. A little financial support for their sacrifices in mental and physical health is the bare minimum a country can and should do for them. Story 94. I am a Veterans Affairs Claims Representative. I feel that about 20% of the claims I review come from people who served the bare minimum and are submitting anything to see what sticks. The laws are clear, and it is hard to get fraud past the checks in place. Many veterans do not receive what they need, and it is a constant fight for them to be heard. As you can imagine, military record keeping has gone through many changes over the years, causing a lot to fall through the cracks. My father served in Vietnam, was exposed to Agent Orange, and did not receive service connection for many of his disabilities until I personally helped him file a claim properly. Other than that, you do not understand the physical and mental toll that service takes unless you have actually served. It is easy to pass judgment from your computer desk when you have done nothing. Story 95. War is dangerous and hazardous to the health of soldiers. If you think someone is cheating the system, look for the doctors signing the papers and investigate those who repeatedly lie for money, just like the government prosecutes doctors who run pill mills. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.